Peter Sobel's here is our Tony Jones. Similar sort of glasses, perhaps. Now, Peter really is an icon in the... I'm just down here. Yeah, that's fine. If you're not familiar with Peter, I would describe him as an icon in the risk industry. Just out of interest, who regularly reads Risk Info? You do? Yes, I do. That's good. Virtually everyone. Just a very quality publication. And as a trade journalist, Peter's understanding of our industry is really second to none. He also commands the respect of both advisors and industry stakeholders alike. Thank you so much, Peter. I'll let you introduce our panellists, and it's more chance for interaction and questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Hello everyone. Looking forward to having this conversation. I'm not quite sure where it's going to take us, but it's a privilege to have the opportunity to talk to effectively 6 different voices amongst the 8 people that are on the stage here this morning. But before I go into that, I just want to add my own congratulations to Aaron. This whole day is as a result of Aaron's passion, and I just want to congratulate him and his team for putting it together. It's fantastic. So we have 6 voices, and we're going to have a conversation. We're going to talk about things. It's basically revolving around the issues stemming from the new life insurance framework, and that's what everyone's talking about at the moment. It's the only game in town. And in talking about these issues, I hope we're going to cover all of the questions and issues that are on your mind. If we don't, I hope there'll be an opportunity at the end for a few questions from the floor as well. Most of the questions have been submitted by advisors prior to today, and that's going to be the focus of the discussion. But as I said, we've got 6 different voices. We have a lone advisor representative on the stage representing your point of view. We have the Advisor Association, we have the licensee, we have the life company, we have the regulator, and importantly, we have the consumer. So I think that if everyone agrees on everything, I'll be a bit disappointed. So hopefully it'll be a robust conversation, but a respectful conversation. You've met Damien, Niall and Mark Philo already today. Phil Anderson, the Chief Operating Officer from the Association of Financial Advisors for not much longer. Well, are you going to be COO of 2 organisations at the same time over the next couple of months, Phil, or something like that?
No, it's not going to work that way.
Okay.
I'll hold on to some AFA responsibilities through to our conference in Cairns in 25th to 27th of October.
Okay, thanks. Welcome, Phil. To Louise McCauley, who's a Senior Executive Leader at for Financial Advisors at ASIC. Welcome, Louise. It's fantastic to have you here today and to get your perspectives. David, where are you? David Learmarkers. Pleased to meet you. We haven't met before. We've spoken, but we haven't met, so nice to meet you, David. David's a Policy Officer within the Consumer Action Law Centre. David is the consumer voice, and it's fantastic to have the opportunity to have a consumer voice at this sort of conversation, because as an industry, I don't think we do it enough. The consumer, Damien just talked about consumer centricity. It's everything we do, everything we talk about, everything you're motivated to do has to do with serving the interest of the consumer. But I think too often the consumer voice isn't at the table. So that's why it's such a pleasure to have you along, David, and interested to hear what you have to say. Hello, Wayne Hanley, the founder of Bombora Advice, representing the licensee view today, an industry legend. Welcome to you, Wayne. Okay, are we good? I think we're good. I've got some great questions, I really do. Hang on a minute. As I said, these questions have been submitted by you, perhaps some of you in the audience today. In fact, I know some of you in the audience today. And from all around Australia, they've been submitted via comments down the bottom of Risk Info Stories or through the Australian Risk Advisors LinkedIn site. In asking these questions, as I said, I hope we'll cover all of the issues that are on your mind. At the end of the day, you'll decide, and if you'd like, hopefully you'll have that opportunity to ask some of your own questions. David. We're going to start off with David. A question for the consumer from our host, from Aaron Zellman. So stick with me. It's a reasonably... Okay. It's about the value of the advice that you deliver. So I've just knocked that, guys. Sorry about that. So stick with me. David, your organisation calls for a fee for service, no commission approach to risk insurance advice. Many Australians, says Aaron, will not pay $7 to see a GP. Do you remember that political conversation last year? In addition to their actual premiums they pay for their life insurance policies, what do you think mums and dads will pay for the advice of a risk insurance advisor?
Thanks for having me first, and Aaron, thanks very much for inviting me. We are not great in the consumer movement of inviting industry to our conferences, so I do really appreciate being here and having the opportunity to say something and have probably everyone in the room disagree with me. Hopefully it'll be a good conversation though. After that politeness, I'm going to politely disagree with the premise of your question, Aaron. People are paying for their advice now. They're paying for it through a commission. So an insurer is paying a commission to an advisor. The consumer then repays that over time in instalments through their insurance premiums. So, and I had a great conversation this morning with Phil Anderson. He basically sold me life insurance. So thanks for that. A great sales pitch for the value of advice. The insurance people get is better. It's cheaper in the long run. So will people pay for the advice? Yes, I think they will. If people know that by getting advice they're getting a better product, they have better peace of mind, that advice, although it's a cost to them, saves them money in the long run, well, yeah, I think they'll pay for it. The idea of shifting the cost of advice from a commission to a fee, I think the fear is that, you know, put that fee in front of people and it'll scare them off getting advice. Well, I think that's a marketing challenge more than anything. But I mean, people buy insurance itself, which is also something that they have to pay for. They have to shell out a bunch of money, knowing that investment, if you want to see it that way, may never pay off. But people think, people know that they need it. They're willing to put the money down, and they know that in the long run they're better off for having it. I think the marketing, I think the sell for advice is exactly the same. If people think that money they put down for advice is going to leave them better off in the long run, if it's going to help them protect their income, protect their family, well, yes, I think they'll pay for it. I think they will pay for it, but how you sell that, I'm probably not the guy to ask. I think you need to talk to a marketing company. Okay,
we will. Just want to drill down a little bit more before we move on. Can I just quickly, a show of hands, how many of you attended the AFA Life Insurance Roadshow that was here in Melbourne on Monday? Just a quick show of hands, reasonable number. Part of that, and this is coming back to you, David, was an assessment of what an average cost of delivering life insurance advice may be, and it was broken down in terms of the activities and the cost associated with each of those activities. It's a piece of string, David, but give or take, an average cost of delivering life insurance advice might be $3,500. Are you okay, as a consumer voice, to tell our audience today that consumers will be happy to pay a fee of $3,500 for the life insurance advice solutions and services that our colleagues here will deliver?
I mean, as I said at the start, I think they're paying it now. So yes, and again, it's a sell, it's a marketing ask. If people think it's genuinely worth their while to get that advice, if they think they'll be better off in the long run, then yes, I think they will pay it. I'm not necessarily saying you've got to charge that $3,000 as soon as someone walks in the door. I think there has to be some kind of, I think there's room for discussion about how people pay it and how you make it affordable. And when I say affordable, I'm not just talking about the price itself, but how someone ends up paying it. People buy things all the time that they can't afford to pay for up front, right? There are a variety of different ways you can do it, but people do it. I think that's the challenge. So how do we get people to see the value in the product and see that they can actually afford it, and it's better off for them in the long run? That's the challenge.
All right, okay, Sam, I'm coming to you. I've written it, I've heard people say it. The issue with charging a fee for advice is either an issue in the mind of the consumer, or it's only an issue in the mind of the advisor who thinks it's not possible. What's your take on that, Sam? And do you have anything else you'd like to say in response to what David said so far?
Look, if you're talking about risk-only advice, I would dare say that none of my existing clients, if I positioned a fee of $3,500 to begin with, would have paid for that to get that advice, even if I showed them a reduction of, say, 20% in the premium. So whilst David is correct in that they're paying for it via the commission, if you were to re-engineer it and dial down the commission and position a $3,500 fee, I just simply don't think they would pay it. That's my opinion, and David's obviously got a different opinion. I don't see that, David, in a sense, you've probably answered what I believe the intent of Aaron's question is. So, in relation to the GP co-payment and that debate, people would have seen that there's value in going and seeing a GP and getting your health checked, but there was vehement opposition to that $7.50 co-payment being charged. Same thing, you could have the best marketing spiel, the best CVP out there, but if you said to someone, come and buy an intangible product, but you know what, it's going to cost you $3,500 for me to prepare the advice documents in order for you to do that, I just don't see them doing it. Against a backdrop of an underinsurance crisis that we're already in the country. So, yeah, I'd put my life on it to say that it'll be a hard sell. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I don't know any, if many, risk advisors that are operating on a pure fee-for-service basis.
Yeah, that's true. There was comments we've received that the conversation about charging a fee for advice is, and the examples that are being used about how it's working most often relate to a holistic advice practice where it's not a pure life insurance conversation. So again to you, Sam, do you think the days of the pure risk advice proposition are numbered? Do you think, as has been articulated by other sort of consultants and commentators in the industry, that for the pure risk advisor, they may need to redefine what constitutes value when they're talking to their client, such as become involved more in estate planning advice or management, cash flow advice, budgeting, develop a portfolio or a series of services that includes life insurance advice, but is not exclusively life insurance advice?
It's a good question, because it's a question I've asked myself, being in business, and I've said, you know, is under the new landscape, is it still worthwhile? And I think the attendance in the room in itself is suggestive that the people that have invested their time are willing to look for ways to adapt and survive and thrive. So I think we'll come out the other end, and I think there is room for risk specialists, and Eddie will probably talk to that a little bit later on. But I think we will have to look for ways to become efficient, and more importantly, if we have to start positioning a fee in terms of a hybrid type model where we're charging a commission, but if that's not covering our costs, we've got to look to recoup our costs by way of charging a fee. Then perhaps we need to get better at articulating our value, becoming better educated, etc. But I don't think it's the end of us. I think we'll get through it, and I think there's a need for us to get through it.
Okay, so perhaps just a quick show of hands. I've got no idea whether this is a good idea, but just wondering, based on everything you've heard, based on everything you know to this point, the questions for risk-focused financial advisors, say the 60-20 hybrid model comes in as of 1 January, are you contemplating changing your own advice proposition or staying exactly the same as you are? So it's yes or no. Who's contemplating changing the package of their advice services to accommodate the new remuneration and life insurance framework structures? Who are you contemplating changing it? And who's looking to stay the same, just sticking to what you're doing? Difficult to know. It's sort of 50-50. Does that look 50-50? Okay, thanks.
Peter, just one other comment on paying fees for life insurance advice. I think Niall talked about 30% of applications don't end up in a policy being placed. So paying $3,500 to get nothing at the end is a pretty big ask on consumers.
Okay, thank you, Phil. We could go on forever. We've got to keep moving on. Okay. There were a few related questions. One from, I can't call you Antoinette, really, Nettie Hanley asked, David, what do you see as a fair way for consumers to pay for their insurance advice? I think you've already answered that question. And you also articulated it doesn't have to be $3,500 up front. But perhaps we can explore that a little bit. How do you see a fair way for consumers?
I'd just lay down two principles. One is that the remuneration method should be aligning the interests of the advisor and the consumer. That's one. The second thing is that the amount the consumer is paying is transparent. So I've heard that already today from Phil, saying that when you sign up, you're clear what commission you're paying. But there's transparent and there's transparent. If I want to buy a TV, I can jump online and I can look at Harvey Norman, JB Hi-Fi and a bunch of others, and I can see prices in front of me of how much that different TVs are going to cost me. I don't think I can do that with life insurance advice. There's...
Wayne.
David, first of all, it's just terrific to have you here, and I think it's important that we say that we might be in violent agreement on a number of things, because we represent the consumers, because consumers are buying our services and our products day in, day out, week in, week out, in a trusted environment, because they trust us.
Hang on a sec, Wayne. Can you get to hold the mic closer to you?
Did you hear that? Hear a little bit better. So I was just saying that it's just so good to have David here, and I hope this is the start of a process of engagement, because we're on the same side. Because day in, day out, week in, week out, customers show their faith and trust in us because they take our advice. Now, as a senior executive of a major licensee for many, many years, we're one of the first organisations to disclose brokerage to clients. In the 17 years that I was CEO of that business, we never received one customer complaint about the price that they paid. So I think this is a very important part. And what I'm seeing here is that this is a great opportunity for us to take David on a journey so he actually understands what we do. And I think that's what has been missed to a large extent, and I'm just so pleased to see David and ASIC on this stage so they can open up dialogue with the advice community, the real people who are looking after consumers.
Good point. So you think there's actually historically hasn't been enough dialogue, enough connect between the regulator, the consumer, the industry?
Absolutely not. And it's just been so evident in the process that we've just seen unfold in the last 8 months of how distant ASIC, the advice community and the consumer groups are. And at the end of the day, it's quite an oxymoron, because we're all on the side of the consumer, because we don't survive unless we provide that advice. And they're taking our advice in droves.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. We'll move on. I'm going to talk to you, Phil. You're up. It's about clawbacks. This is from Jeremy Wright. Question to Phil Anderson. Phil, will the AFA be rejecting the 3-year clawback as non-negotiable position? Pretty simple question, Phil. Where are we at?
It is a very simple question, and I'd like to address it in 3 parts. The first one is the context around how we got to that outcome. The second one is the impact of it, and the third one is what we do about it. The first bit of context, of course, and Damien set that out this morning, this all started in October of last year in many ways, but it had already been running live in 2012 when the FSC tried to get a policy up that led to a 3-year clawback, which they were going to do by an ACCC agreement. So we had the release of the ASIC report in October. Damien talked about anchor points, and the anchor point then significantly got changed in the mind of the government with the FSI report that came out in December that said we should have level commissions. And then we had the Trowbridge inquiry, the Trowbridge report, leading on to then the debate and the negotiations over the life insurance framework. I think the important bit of context here is that this was not like the FOFA outcome where we had one side of politics who was largely on side. And we had the product providers industry body also on our side. On this particular occasion, the media has been very firmly in favour of significant change to life insurance. The FSC, you can see the submission they put to Trowbridge was about significant change, really significant change. The Trowbridge report, we weren't happy with that. We worked furiously to try and get him to see the reality of the life insurance industry, and we had many vigorous and at times angry debates there. We then ended up in a position where we had the Trowbridge report, we had the FSI, and the government basically said to the industry, you guys need to get together and reach an agreement on a position to move forward. And the government intervened quite significantly in that debate to influence some of the outcomes. But from the government's perspective, and the message to us was, we've got the FSI, we need to respond to that, you come back with an alternative proposal. So it was a compromise. It was very much a negotiated compromise. We wanted to retain a hybrid in a form that was as acceptable as possible. But part of that compromise was to get a 3-year transition period and to concede to a clawback, an increased clawback. Now, the FSC in 2012 wanted 100, 75% in year 2 and 50% in year 3. So to some extent, we feel comforted that we have got a better outcome, although we know it's very uncomfortable for advisors. So that's the context. We were forced to reach an agreement with the FSC and the FPA, and this was part of the negotiation. The government made it clear if we couldn't reach an agreement, then we were more than likely facing the FSI type outcome of level commissions only. So then moving on to the second point, the impact. Now, I'm not wanting to understate the significance of clawback, but I want to put some context around it. We saw some stats earlier on about persistency and lapse rates. In year 3, if you lost 10% of your clients, you'd lose 3% of the initial commission that was paid to you. So the 30% that applies in year 3 to the 10% clients you lost in year 3. That's 3% of the total revenue. Even if you lost 20% of your clients in year 3, that's 6% of the initial revenue. So I don't want to understate the significance of this issue, but I think we need to have the facts on the table as to the financial implications of it. So next question is, what do we do about it? Given that it was part of the agreement, it was a negotiated outcome, what do we do? Well, the AFA is continuing to lobby for the fact that clawback should only be applied in circumstances where the advisor has replaced the business. If it's no fault of the advisor, i.e. the client loses their job and they can no longer afford the cover, their circumstances change and they no longer need the cover, or they no longer need the cover at the current level, their business closes down, circumstances that aren't the fault of the advisor, we've said, well, that shouldn't be the case that it's applied. Now, we know we'll get extremely strong resistance on that. So let's move on to the next point. What can the advisor do?
Hang on a sec, Phil, hang on. You know you'll get extremely strong resistance on qualifying the circumstances under which the clawback may apply. So the life insurance framework will potentially get ratified through the Assistant Treasurer's response, broader response to the financial system inquiry. The question is there any room for movement after that? about qualifying how clawbacks will work?
Well, certainly we have put our position to the Minister, and we've shared it with the FSC, the circumstances under which we think it's appropriate for it to be applied. And we have specifically said that it shouldn't be applied in circumstances that are no fault of the advisor.
Will the AFA agitate to continue that conversation if it doesn't fall your way?
We are continuing that discussion, and I understand that Bragg will be doing further things today on that front.
Okay, we'll look forward to seeing how that unfolds.
So Peter, the last point to make on clawback is the capacity of advisors to influence retention. And I think there are many good reasons to focus on retention because it preserves your business. But part of the life insurance roadshow that we've just done is we've had a number of sessions on talking about maximising relationships and the work that can be done to preserve clients and retain those relationships. So that remains something that as a community we need to focus on to minimise the lapses in those second and third year.
Okay, so if I asked for a show of hands right now and the question was, do you support, are you okay, are you comfortable with the 3-year clawback, how do you reckon I'd go with the response?
Well, I think you'll get the same response that we have, which is we strongly disagree. We fought against the 3-year clawback from the beginning, but it was a negotiated part of this outcome that we didn't have to agree with that as a specific, but we were forced to reach an agreement on an overall outcome.
Okay, I'm going to ask 2 questions. Who strongly disagrees with the 3-year clawback? Okay, hands down. Who can, based on your business model right now, who can work with the 3-year clawback and not go out of business? Way less people. Okay, the 3rd question, if the 3-year clawback is applied, how many people will consider quitting their business? No, 1 person. So, okay, thank you for that. Think about what that means. It's a question for all panel now, and we're talking about churn and lapse. So it's a question from Timothy Van Dor. He wants a simple yes-no question for all panel members, and in asking the question it brings up lots of other issues as well. But Timothy's question is, should we define the difference between a lapse and a churn? Again, it's a simple question, but there's a lot behind the answer. So who hasn't spoken yet? Can we, perhaps one of our live company colleagues, perhaps, you've got the mic, Mark. Let's go with you and see where it takes us.
So what the question was?
Should we define the difference between a lapse and a churn? I guess we need to appreciate what motivated the question in the first place, but let's see how you go and we'll just have a conversation.
So I think the answer is yes, we should define the difference between a lapse and a churn. The challenge is, what do we do with that information? Because, you know, in our environment, and certainly in my organisation, we ask questions of clients that choose to cancel their policies. We don't actually ask them questions when they lapse because they just leave. So the challenge is that we need to be asking people on the way in the rationale for them moving their business. But when we ask customers that are cancelling their policies, the challenge is that the response can be gamed. I know that 18% of our cancellations are because an advisor has asked for them to move that policy. So there's a whole range of reasons for, and quite rightly so, for good reasons. So when I refer to business moving, I refer to it as being replacement business. I don't necessarily refer to it as churn. My view around churn is that we actually generate reports on a monthly basis, and we identify individuals that, you know, in isolation may be moving business for very, very good reasons. But when they're moving 30 cases a month for very, very good reasons, that's a real challenge. So every individual case is explainable. However, we will have a conversation with an advisor, and maybe there's someone in this room that we've had that conversation with, and ask them why they're systematically moving the business. And the response can sometimes be, because I don't like you anymore and I'm churning all of my business out of you. And that is the reality of the situation. So, and that is what actually brings our industry down in some instances, whereas there are other advisors that say, look, best interest for my client, I need to move it, there's an affordability challenge and it's going to X, Y, Z. We don't have an issue with that when we capture that information. So, long answer to a short question, the answer is we should better understand it, but we need to take steps in terms of identifying who we believe are the systematic churners. I know that there's been a call for the life officers to collaborate around, you know, this industry list. Again, to Damien's point before, it's challenging to kind of collaborate or collude in those types of circumstances, but we address them individually, and I know that advisors that will read or see or listen to this will know who they are.
Look, I don't probably have a huge amount to add to what Mark's already said. All I'll say is it's quite difficult to define the difference between a churn and a lapse. I know everyone might go, well, no, it's very simple. But the reality is, when we go out and speak to the advisors, there's always reasons behind most cases. Just want to touch briefly on the 3-year responsibility period. I think it's great to see that no one's hands went up when you asked that question, Peter, about people leaving. The reality is, retention is going to become something that we all need to get a lot better at, and I think part of these changes are going to be life insurance companies are going to really start working with you much better than we ever have done about how we retain clients long term. At the moment, most of us have retention teams, but all we do is we just collect premium. The reality is we need to do a lot more working with you in how we retain that and how we interact with customers in regards to our renewal notices, etc., etc.
Okay, David, I'll let you go. If you can hand the mic to Wayne. Wayne, what's the difference between a churn and a lap? And let's extrapolate a little bit about what might have motivated the question. I think the question, to an extent, relates to fairness, particularly when we're talking about clawbacks. We're getting, I think, back to the clawback question again. So the question to you is what's fair and what's not in terms of clawbacks? And second question is, do you support the blacklisting of serial churners?
The life officers know, I think, because they're in charge of data, and also licensees would know if there are serial churners. But you know, churning is an internal word, and I think this argument is a broader argument about definition. And I'll ask the audience, what's the definition of a lapse?
Anything that stops.
So if I ask the three companies beside me what their definition is a lapse, like I asked Sally Lone, who's the CEO of the Financial Services Council, if she knew what the definition of a lapse was, and she couldn't answer me. Because the issue goes broader. You couldn't articulate straight away. We can't articulate it straight away. How on earth does the consumer group articulate it straight away? So it's a case of understanding, because it seems like a mystic cloud of artful deception that we don't understand. And we haven't been provided with any statistics of churn. We haven't been provided with any statistics. And we have companies who go out and turn books. Is that a churn? Is that a churn? So it's okay if it's coming to me, but it's not okay if it's leaving me.
So Wayne, I get your frustration, and it's reflected in lots of conversations I have with lots of people in the industry, not just advisors. The unbelievable frustration there appears to be in the lack of a consistent definition of a lapse, in the seeming impossibility of being able to access churn figures. So we'll keep this conversation going. I'll go to the other side of the stage and ask the question in a slightly different way. We bring in the issue of best interest. So it's still a related question. As soon as I can find it. This is from Philip Alexander, and his question is, it's a simple question to all members of the panel. What constitutes a breach of best interest duty, and what constitutes a churn? See, it's effectively the same conversation, but we're bringing in the issue of best interest. If it's in the client's best interest to change the contract, to change the policy, I'm going to get hit with a clawback. So let's start off. Who's got the microphone? Hello.
I have the microphone.
Hi, Louise.
I have the microphone.
Let's go for it. And welcome to you, Louise. It's a pleasure
you.
to have the opportunity to have you speak to us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me here today. So I didn't get a chance to give a response to the previous question, what's the difference between a lapse and a churn? From our perspective, when we see a client moved into a new insurance policy and it is not in that client's best interests, then we think that's a problem. And the colloquial reference to it is a churn. In our report that we did on life insurance, we didn't use the word churn, but we talked about situations where it was not in the best interest of the client to be put into a new policy, and that's what we're concerned about. So I understand that there are issues around lapse, and it's very, very difficult to define that. We've got quite a blunt definition, I think, of churn, in the sense that we're really looking for a situation where it's not in the best interest of the client. And there can be a little bit of a grey area when you're moving a client to a new policy. Is it or isn't in the best interest? We're way over the side where it clearly isn't in the best interest. And unfortunately for this industry, we do see a lot of that, and that was the kind of thing that we reported on in our report. On best interest duty, across the advice industry, we see many myriad other examples of situations where advice isn't in the client's best interest. But certainly in respect of churn, it's all about putting the client in a new policy where it's not in their best interest.
Okay.
Clearly not in their best interest.
Understood. Is there anything else you want to add, Louise?
Not at this
Okay,
point.
we'll just move to your right. We'll give Phil the opportunity to have a think.
From my perspective, it's very clear. Churn is the inappropriate replacement of product. Inappropriate, doesn't meet the best interest duty. The rest of product replacement that is in the best interest of the client is not churn, and churn should only be used to represent inappropriate product replacement that is illegal in the first place because it doesn't comply with the best interest duty. The use of the word churn in a broader context is just a terrible outcome because it misleads consumers that a replacement of a product that's in the best interest of a client is somehow wrong. It's not. And advisors have that obligation to look after the best interests of their clients, and if through doing a review they identify that they're better off in another product, then they're bound to look at that and make a recommendation. So I think that we've got to bring clarity to the issue of churn and make sure that it's only used in a very narrow context. Lapse, we've also got to have a look at, and ASIC had a pretty good go at it in report 413, and I think it was somewhere like paragraph 110 or 100, somewhere around there.
You're just showing off now, Phil, aren't you?
It was 111, Phil.
Thanks, Wayne. Appreciate the clarification. So it's worth having a look at that because we are worried that this is going to get taken out of context and all sorts of things will be considered as lapses, partial lapses and so on that shouldn't be. I think that it's really important that we do look at this definition and we get it right, but let's not confuse product replacement with churn.
Okay, Sam, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I think this is going to be critical in relation to the clawback period in terms of how it lands, and it's interesting that Damien's here as the chairman of the Life Board. I'm with Louise, and I think most advisors know that churn is where replacement business occurs and it's clear that there's no benefit to the client. We don't want to get dudded on this one when the definition's out in relation to get clawback. So a client goes from smoker to non-smoker, reduction in premium, we shouldn't get penalised in regards to that. So I think there's got to be a conversation around that. I don't think we can ever confuse the best interest duty and this churn issue. I think you've always got to meet your best interest duty. The question is, in meeting that, is there going to be financial detriment to you, the advisor, because you're going to have to take some action that may hit your pocket in terms of a clawback. That's another can of worms, and then we've got to find mechanisms to deal with that. But I don't think we can ever say that get away from our best interest duty because we're going to take a hit. I think you've got to meet the best interest duty.
Yeah, I got
period.
you. So the devil can potentially be in the detail. You must serve your client's best interests. And if that involves moving a policy inside the first 3 years, as I say, the devil's in the detail. You, as an advisor, would not want to be penalised for doing the right thing by your client, essentially.
The best interest duty is already laid down, in a sense. The devil will be in the detail in terms of defining a lapse for the purpose of a clawback.
Okay. Can you hand the mic up to Damien? Damien, just a quick question in relation to this issue, clarity. Can the life companies, can the FSC find a way to get greater clarity around what constitutes churn and define it and report it?
So firstly, I'm a co-chair of the Life Board Committee, but I'm not here in my capacity as an FSC director. I'm here as AA and my own personal views, so hopefully you'll take that in the spirit that's intended, and I'm pretty transparent about things, so take it for what it is. I want to answer a couple of things. So the first thing was a question with a yes or no answer. Is that right?
Yeah, which one are you referring to, Damien?
So yes, it should be defined. Why haven't we defined it today? It's sort of probably been, it's a little bit instructive because it's been very difficult too. And I think Phil's right, and Wayne, that ASIC has done a good job to try and do that in the report. So I'm not going to add any more value to this conversation in terms of saying the same things that everyone else has. Best interest is fundamental to trust and protecting consumer outcomes. So David should be very much advocating for that, and I think it's already laid down, so no one disagrees with that. Best interest is fundamental and critical, and it's not a life company's position to try and determine whether an advisor or what was in the best interest of the client, because we're not privy to that conversation around their needs and their circumstances. I want to move away from that for a second, because I think we do need to define it, and I think clarity is important, because once again it goes to the point of knowing more about the needs of consumers around life insurance. So why are they not staying on, and we need to understand those things. The bigger issue is this, which we haven't solved yet. So I get it, absolutely support it in terms of best interest, but the problem we have is fundamentally, structurally, we've got a problem, because the products we're developing are meant to be there for 5 to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 years, and they're not relevant after 12 months, 2 years, 3 years. Yes, there's going to be circumstances in life, and we all get life happens, right? Where your needs might, something in life would have changed. You may have lost a job, you divorce, family member, something. You know, there's circumstances where you have fundamental life stage change where, you know, that would fundamentally mean your needs has shifted profoundly. But the problem is, we've got a structural issue more broadly that we need to solve. So why are we developing products for you to distribute that are actually based on being in force for 7, 8, 9, 10 years and above, but they're not actually relevant? So I know that's taken a different lens on it, but the problem is we solve one problem, we don't solve the other problem. I've been on the record before in saying that, you know, churn is a word that's used horribly wrong within our industry, and in terms of whatever lapse rate the industry proposes, to say that that's all down to churn is a farce. We know that the issues are, and we do talk to clients when they leave or understand research. It is affordability. It's, you know, their life circumstances change. They can find a cheaper premium. You know, there's all those reasons. So I think we need to be careful, and I do think we need to try and get better at defining it, which is complex. But how do we solve the broader issue, which goes back to what I was saying before? Can we develop a proposition together that's actually going to be relevant over a longer period of time? Because otherwise we're still going to just create the same issue again. Because ultimately, forget about churn or other things, if the policies aren't staying on the books long enough, then fundamentally that means everyone's premium over time is going to go up. So we've got to actually be better at aligning a proposition that meets the need, that, or let's recognise how long we're selling that, how long that product serves its purpose for, and let's position the product for that. So I know it's a different way to look at it, but that's...
Okay, hang on a minute.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks, mate. Guys, could I have a handheld microphone up here? Thanks. Next question is from Troy Edmondson, a pretty well-known advisor. And a former AFA Advisor of the Year. Troy asks, it's a question to the life companies and to Louise, to ASIC. And it's about the current level commission, the give or take 30% level commission. So I'm respecting Troy's question, but that's pretty well what it's about. So I'll read out his question. Josh Frydenberg indicated in his recent press release that level commission terms should remain as they are, i.e. around the 30-33% figure, with zero responsibility period, zero clawback. Will the life company representatives indicate whether they will continue with their current level commission terms as they are now? If not, what are you proposing going forward? And a question for Louise in the same context. Do you consider it appropriate that insurers reduce their level commission terms when the ASIC report 413 clearly indicated advisor recommendations under level commission posed no issue? So we'll come to you later, Louise. We'll take the three life company comments first. Before I do, just quickly read what Mr. Frydenberg did say in his release when he announced the life insurance framework proposals. And it's a preamble just before the 14 points. He says, this proposal is not intended to limit the industry's current ability to operate on a level commission or fee for service basis. That's exact wording. So we've just heard from you, Damien. Over to you guys.
Geez, I'll take the loaded gun. I think I need to wear a flak jacket today. I think the answer is it depends. I made a comment before in my presentation around the cost of remuneration is not going down. So in terms of looking at the costs around upfront versus hybrid versus level, I think there's a challenge there. And you know, listening to what you said around Frydenberg's commentary, he didn't talk anything about 33 versus 25 versus 42 or anything. He just talked about the notion of a level remuneration. So in terms of where we're at, and I won't speak on behalf of anybody else, but we're not sure where that is going to land. I know that the AFA has publicly said that let the market decide on where it should naturally land. So we're continuing to look for, have our internal conversations and also look for guidance in terms of where that lands. Personally, again, reflecting back on my own presentation, there's a cost impact here. So if we do go with a 33% level commission, it's not congruent or commensurate with comparing it to an 88-22 or a 20 level or whatever. So I think that there's a cost impact there, and will the customer in the long term wear that cost? Again, I'm just putting it out there.
All right, supplementary question, Mark. We're talking about level commission, and I know there are a lot of advisors in the audience who'll say, well, forget about level commission because my business model wouldn't work on that anyway, so it's a moot question. But for those for whom it is an issue, or for those interested, speaking just for yourself, not even as a representative of your company, would you be open to the notion if the life insurance framework comes out and says 60-20 hybrid and 3-year clawback, that would you be open to the idea of continuing to offer a flat 30% commission for those advisors that don't want to look at the hybrid model, but really is too much of an ask to simply work on a 20% flat commission? Well, what's the point? You might as well go 60 in the first year if flat commission is only going to be 20% from here on in.
Well, I think that was the intent, to be honest. But yeah, I would support that. That makes sense.
Niall, over to you.
Yes, I would support that. I think there is advisors who are interested in maybe writing level commission and charging a fee. I'd like to see level commission is something that the market decides.
Okay, while we're there, David, you want to make any comment on that? Are you sort of really disappointed with this whole conversation as we're talking about commission at all?
I should probably be clear on that we don't expect anybody to flick a switch and get rid of all commissions overnight. What we want is what we've asked for is a roadmap. That's what we've suggested. What we liked out of the Trowbridge report was that it set down some kind of roadmap, some kind of future where you could move to fees and away from commissions. That's what disappointed us about the industry model released by Josh Frydenberg, but it's a step. Nevertheless, it's a step. And you know, my comment before that got so many tongues talking that commissions are not a transparent way to price something. That's not something that we just have a go at the life insurance advice industry about. We say that to any industry, to any business that prices their products through commissions. We think it's just commissions tend to obscure true prices. They are not as comparable. They're not as easy for people to compare provider to provider, product to product, which means that consumers lose out.
Okay, we'll come back to that because there's a question later about other industries and commissions. So thank you. I'm reminded, by the way, this is a Survive and Thrive Day, and I think there's a big image of a lion behind me. And I'm kind of looking at this as a lion's den with regard to David being here and talking about fee only. So you're a champion, keep it going, but keep it relevant. Let's just keep talking and see where it takes us. Damien, I just wanted to ask you that same question about whether or not, depending on what capacity in which you want to answer the question, you're open to the notion of a 30% flat commission for those advisors that want to work on a flat commission basis from here on in.
Just to restate, I'm here as AIA and I'm here as Damien. So if anyone wants any FSC comments, that needs to really go to Sally and the team. Yeah, I don't think, I'm with Niall in terms of I don't think we know where the numbers are going to fall in terms of mandate. I think it should be market and you determine what it is, and if level's there, great, we'll offer level, we'll support level. Can I ask a question? Those that aren't writing level now, how many would move to a level 30 as opposed to the other model? Cool. So,
interest, there's certainly
interest.
A market,
I mean, that's what you want, then, you know, it can be done. So it just really depends on where it lands now with the government release. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Thank you, Damien. Over to you, Louise. I'll repeat the question. Do you consider it appropriate that insurers reduce their level commission terms when the ASIC report 413 clearly indicated advisor recommendations on a level commission pose no issue?
In our report, what we identified, one of the key things that we identified was a correlation between high upfront commissions and poor consumer outcomes. So we didn't find the same issue where there was a level commission. I think the pass rate was a quite respectable 93%. Not that higher wouldn't be better, but that's pretty good. So, yeah, level commissions we think don't carry the same incentives to bad advice that very high upfront commissions carry. As for where that level should be set, I think that's really a question for industry. As a philosophical thing, we don't have a problem with a level commission. I guess if it got to a situation where the level commissions were such that they were providing the wrong incentives for good advice to be provided, then we might have a concern. But we're not at that position at the moment. We're still asking the question about what is the right commission structure, I think.
All right, okay, fine. Thank you. We'll go to you, Phil and Sam, then we'll come to you, Wayne, for your take on 30%, okay?
I agree with what Louise has said there, that the ASIC report said 93% for hybrid and level forms of remuneration. So we certainly came out of that report thinking upfronts had limited, very short-term future, but hybrids and level were acceptable. Now, what Louise said was leave it to the industry. What we say is leave it to the market. The market can determine this, and we think it would be wrong if the life insurers were talking amongst themselves about changing the level that applied, the rate that applied for level commission. Leave it to the market, and if the market, through normal competitive practices, leads to some small level of reduction in it over time, then that's an unavoidable outcome. But we certainly would not want to see the industry get together and decide we're going to reduce the rate.
I have a question to Phil. Aren't we clear about where the government stands because of Frydenberg's preamble on the press release that he's happy with level and the way it currently operates?
That was very much part of the negotiations, and it was actually put in there just at the last minute to give confidence that nothing in this framework suggested that there was a change that was required for level commissions. And we have certainly gone back to the Minister's office since that point to seek that confirmation. Nothing in this framework should change the ability for level commission terms to exist as they currently do.
So we know how the government's landed.
We can only rely upon what the Minister said to this point. We have to keep in mind that this has not been approved by Cabinet yet, and that's why we have to stay active in lobbying for the best possible outcome.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Aaron, how much longer have we got? Okay. A question from advisor. I really wanted us to talk about compliance burden and cost, the cost of delivering advice. We're talking about remuneration. The other side is how much it costs. Question from an advisor, ostensibly for ASIC and for the licensee, for Louise and Wayne. Sorry, did I not come to you in the end, Wayne? I missed you. Sorry, mate. You take your opportunity. Okay. What progress has been made to reduce the compliance burden on advisors? What progress has been made to reduce the compliance burden on advisors so that they may operate more efficiently? Has ASIC come to the party? Has ASIC come to the party, Louise?
We like parties. I'm not sure.
Okay, we'll talk some more. We'll party later.
So one of the things that's put forward as part of the industry proposal is having a look at SOAs. And that's certainly something we're open to. I would say to you that we have recently updated and published some guidance around SOAs. So RG 90, which talks about scaled advice for a new client, we revised in 2013. And we also dealt with it in one of our, what you might call FOFA reg guides, Reg Guide 244, about giving advice and scaled advice. So we have tried to put out into the marketplace as much as we can to assist people with being able to do efficient and effective SOAs. So we don't judge SOAs by the number of pages or the number of words. It's about their effectiveness and their ability to communicate to the client the key things that they need to communicate. So we are aware that this is a heavily regulated industry, but then it's a very complex industry dealing with very complex products that can have a huge impact on people's life. Compliance is all about running a business that is going to provide the best advice for the client. That's what you're in business to do. That's what the legislation is saying, is putting in place some rules around to enable you to do that. So the rules are all headed towards enabling you and providing you with a pathway to acting in your client's best interests and complying with your other conduct obligations. We put a checklist at the end of our insurance report that talked about, here are some things that you should look at if you're trying to provide good advice to your clients in the risk space. And so that was a way of trying to assist industry to put into practice some of the things that we had raised. So it's certainly something that's on our mind, and it's certainly something we we strive to achieve. Attitude to compliance is a real indicator of what the culture of an entity is. We're able to see quite clearly when we go and do a surveillance on an advice business what their culture is and whether their business truly is aimed at providing advice that is in the best interest of the client, that's going to give a good outcome to the client by the way that they address their compliance. If the compliance is properly integrated into the business and is part of what the business does in its day-to-day work as it's providing good, sound advice to clients, then that's the sort of culture we're looking for.
Yes, there's no dispute, Louise, about that's the culture we're looking for, but can it be more efficient?
Look, there's no doubt it can be more efficient. So we've got an innovation hub that we've set up recently, which is designed to help new businesses who are dealing in the electronic media, and we're going out of our way to speak to businesses that are thinking of starting up in the electronic advice delivery area. So we're actively going out seeking those businesses and talking to them about how they can do that kind of business.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Over to you, Wayne, very quickly.
Sorry, Peter, can I just put one thing in there? ASIC have given some pretty clear guidance on reducing the size of SOAs. From our perspective, and it'd be good for Wayne to respond to this, is one of the issues we find is the conservativeness amongst licensees as far as SOA templates are concerned. So I think it's important that licensees have a look at how they can simplify and reduce SOAs.
Yeah, Phil, you just spoiled all my fun. I was about to maybe mention that to you, Wayne. Particularly a comment made by Brad Fox, again at the AFA Life Insurance Roadshow on Monday, where he talked to the audience. He said, don't look at ASIC as the barrier to more efficient SOAs. It's the licensee, Wayne.
It's easy to say that when you're not one. And it was nice to see you enjoy parties, Louise, and it's great that the life insurance sector has got ASIC smiling, and I'm very happy about that. I think ASIC did us a lot of favours in the report in that segment, actually, with the checklist. We're looking at it currently. But Peter, the fact is that we live in a world of paranoia. We have legal firms advertising daily about combing over what advice our advisors may have provided. And I don't just mean ours, I mean the advice community. And we not only have to tell people what they know, we have to tell them what they don't know. We have to tell them what they don't know. It's not only how many cookies are in the jar, but what they taste like as well. It's a very difficult thing. And I was so encouraged with ASIC's 12-point plan. What we would love to do with ASIC now as an advice community is to sit down and work through that. And then we can go confidently to our consumer with the support of the regulator. It's a really, really good piece. So I think there is a way forward, and we'll start to look at it after the current 4 or 5 major issues we finalise, hopefully.
All right, okay, Wayne. Anything else you care to add for when it didn't cut to you?
No, I think market forces, but the fact that we're talking about it means that someone's talking about it. Therein lies the answer, I think. But I agree with completely what Phil said.
Okay, thank you. Aaron, have we got time for questions from the floor? I've got one more question. Sorry, mate. I've just got to go one more. Sorry. Sorry, guys. I feel a little bit frustrated on your behalf that surely there's a way to make your business more efficient. If we're looking at reducing your income, if the industry's, then surely they're equally got to look at how we reduce the costs associated with delivering your advice. Final question, and I'm sorry we didn't get to questions from the floor, but it's from someone that's here today, from Nettie Hanley. Given that we know, Louise, question for you. Given that we know how complex insurance advice is and how significantly advisor competence can impact on the quality of advice provided to consumers, why didn't ASIC include the exploration of education, experience and training in their research and report? Why was it just about commissions?
We did include it to a small extent. So our conclusion was that one of the indicators of poor advice was competency of the advisors. So we looked at issues around inadequate inquiry into client circumstances, poor record keeping, inadequate documentation on the file, and poor consideration of related strategic issues. We didn't go into the question of education, which is a really important question, I think, because we'd already dealt with that. I shouldn't say we'd already dealt with that. We were engaged in discussions around that in a number of other separate pieces of work. So we had put out consultation papers in 2011 and 2013 raising issues about educational standards, about having an exam that applied across the advice industry. At that point in time, that conversation wasn't one that the industry really wanted to become engaged in. We got responses to our consultation paper, but they were very, very varied. There was no one view. That's changed in the last couple of years, and so now there's a very strong view about changes that can be made to educational standards. And so PJC has had an inquiry into that. They've issued a report. We have made numerous submissions to PJC, to the FSI. There was an industry working party convened by Treasury, which gave a report to the Assistant Treasurer. And so that is one of the other things that is currently being looked at by the government, and we, like industry, are waiting to hear what the outcome of that will be.
Right, okay. Thank you, Louise, and thank you, everybody. My own apologies. Sorry. Go, Nettie.
Isn't that of added value to the research by adding that standard of competency, education, culture of the licensee?
Look, we could have Nettie, but the report was pretty long and we really wanted to focus in on particular aspects. So that was the key thing around it. We looked at education in other pieces of work that we did.
But if you put it together, it would have been a stronger piece, and you didn't.
Possibly, it could have been a longer report.
Okay, right.
We have plenty of fire in our belly about education.
I know you've got to go fairly well straight after Louise. You've got some other commitments, but just wanted to thank you for coming down especially for this event, and hopefully you'll have the opportunity to continue the conversation with Nettie and with the broader industry on these key issues. I was going to apologise for my own poor time management in not having time for further questions from the floor, but hopefully most of our colleagues will be around for the rest of the day if you have an opportunity to come up to them and to follow up on anything that it is that you'd like to cover from these discussions today. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much to Peter in particular for pulling that all together so beautifully.